Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. We're going to give everyone just a few minutes to log in and let everyone kind of register and get settled in. So please wait a second and we'll be right with you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for waiting for us while we gave everyone a few minutes to log in. We're going to go ahead and get started with today's webinar. So today we are covering the Fairfax Cryobank webinar regarding sperm donor screening and testing. And today's webinar will be recorded. So for the folks who are not able to join us live or possibly need to hop off early, this will be on our YouTube channel later this afternoon, and we will email a copy out to everyone. So no worries there. Today's webinar, we're going to be joined by Christina Garcia, who will be leading the webinar. She's our cryobank manager that you can see, if you can see her on the camera there. In addition, we have Doreen Duggan, our manager of client services. She will be popping in towards the end as we go through Q&A, and myself, our marketing representative, who will be moderating Q&A. As today's webinar goes along, please put your questions in as they pop into your head while Christina is presenting. I will save those for the end and we will go through them as time allows, but please don't wait and feel like you can go ahead and put those in at any point today. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Christina Garcia and I'm the Cryobank Manager for Fairfax Cryobank. I am going to go over our webinar goals for today. So we're going to talk about the detailed overview of the donor screening process. We're also going to go over donor testing and their exams, donor categories, and then we're also going to review the information, which is a lot of additional information, and the vial types. At the end of the session, we'll do our Q&A. All right. So before I get started, I wanted to actually explain what DRC means. It is the Donor Review Committee, and they consist of the medical director, labs manager, genetic counselor, and the directors of client services. When all of the sites get all of this information put together from the donor, we all submit it to the DRC team, and they will be the ones who will deem the candidate eligible or suitable to move on to the next steps. So we do have an initial approval first, and then we also have a final approval process. So it's not really easy to become a donor. There's a lot of steps that entail with the whole approval process. So I'm going to go into further detail with that down the line. So before we start the application process, recruitment is a very important part of our business, and we are diligently trying to recruit donors all the time and trying to diversify our donor pool. So we do have 6 locations. We have Fairfax, Virginia, which is our corporate office. We have Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Roseville, Minnesota, Houston, Austin, Texas, and we have Pasadena, California, where I'm located. And we recently just added Miami, Florida. So we have all of these sites working with the marketing team to try to strategize a plan and try to think of different methods of how we can market and recruit donors. So some of the examples we have is online, social media, we print, some of the sites do radio and they'll do flyering. We try to look for local or social events or flyer at colleges, etc. So there's plenty of ways that we're trying to strategize plans, but we are also open to any suggestions, so we can try to diversify our donor pool. Currently, we have donors of the ages of 18 to 39. Majority of our donors are probably about like 19 to 29, and 20% of them are married. 20% have children of their own, and it's actually really hard to become a donor. Like I mentioned, 1 in 200 initial applicants will become a donor. And again, this is where the DRC comes into when we try to start from the first application to all the way to the very end. So here's a list of items that I actually put down for the screening before initial approval. So we have the application, 3 to 4 screening samples, background checks, ADGP, eligibility questionnaires, interviews with trained staff members, in-house photos of the donor, and the PAI. So once we have all of this information, the DRC will review for initial approval. I'll go into more detail with each one. So we start with the donor application. When a donor is ready and he wants to apply, he goes onto our website, beaspermdonor.com. He'll set up an account and provide his initial information. And then you'll see there's an initial suitability and eligibility questionnaire. It's a very extensive health questionnaire, and it contains 3 to 4 generations of medical history. So I say 4 generations because, as I mentioned in the previous slide, 20% of our donors actually have their own children. So that would be considered the 4th generation. They'll also provide their information, their parents' information, their generation, and their grandparents' generation. Included on that is lifestyle questions. So lifestyle questions include more of like the health and well-being of the donor, whether if they diet or exercise, or if they drink a lot, smoke a lot, and their sexual activity. So all of these are indicators of semen quality. And so once one of the staff members will review the donor application, they'll decide whether they should move into the next step, which goes into the semen sample screening. So semen sample screening, once the donor has passed the application process, they will come into the office, one of our sites, and leave their fresh sample. We require 3 to 4 samples to be collected over 2 to 4 weeks. So we say 2 to 4 weeks because we tell donors to abstain for about 3 to 5 days. So that is a long period of time. So we try to get something of their vials that are consistent. So they will do a semen evaluation to ensure the semen quality. So once they leave a fresh sample, the lab technicians will do a semen evaluation to see if that fresh sample even qualifies into the next step. So if it does, then they will do a freezing process, and then the next business day they will do the freeze thaw process to see if the vial or their specimen actually survives the freeze thaw process. So if they don't pass the fresh process, most of the time, if it's too low, they'll be automatically rejected. Or if it's kind of borderline, maybe we might invite them again for another screen. That's why we say 3 to 4. So basically, after the day that they do the freeze thaw process, they're checking for the survivability of the semen. And so we freeze it in about -196 degrees Celsius. So you can see how it is very hard on the cells the next day. So sometimes donors won't pass. If they don't, sometimes we'll have them come again and do another screening deposit. If they do, then we are moving them to the next screening process. So it takes a while for them. That's why we say 2 to 4, 6 weeks. So again, we're looking for consistency in sample production. So if they pass their first screen, we do a donor interview. The donor interview can either be done on the second or the third donor screen. One of our experienced staff members will go over the whole application process. They will go over all of the donor details of the program. They will make sure that their medical application is accurate. They want to make sure to state clearly that this is a significant commitment. Not only are children being born, but you're creating families. And so also, we do require for them to at least make one deposit for at least 6 months to give us ample amount of vials. Some of the donors, obviously, if you're in school or their work comes into play, family life, sick, we're lenient, but we do still try to have them come in to make that commitment. So it doesn't stop there. So once a donor is retired, they will continue with the donor program. So they'll still come and do ongoing testing. They'll do donor annual updates. I have slides down the line, and I'll go ahead and explain all those later. But they will always be a part of this program, and especially until we release files. So the next topic is medical history review and eligibility questionnaires. So every time a donor makes a deposit, they have to fill out the eligibility questionnaire, sorry guys, and the medical history review. And so that is also done on the day of the interview, as well as anytime they do a blood draw. So the in-house photos of the donor, we take a photo of the donor, and then we will take pictures of their hands, their full body picture, clothed, and then their face side by side. This is to show the DRC that, if there's any type of deformity, or anything, that they could physically see it and make that initial approval. Personality Assessment Inventory, the PAI. So this is a standardized test which identifies the psychological background of the applicants. We started doing this, I believe, in 2017, maybe early 2018, but we have someone who scores and reviews from a PhD level mental health professional. We do have a clinical licensed psychologist who generates the report for the cryobank. So they will determine if anyone who scores and indicates a psychopathology or a mental illness, they are excluded from the program. So these reports will go to the DRC, and then they will be the ones to determine whether they should pass or fail. Sometimes there's in between, so we get a lot of more data to try to see if they should move forward. But all of this information, the personal assessment inventory, the donor interview, with the semen sample, in the application process, the medical application, this is all given to the DRC for initial approval. So donors aren't approved yet into the program. We still have the other half to do. So before the final approval, we must receive initial approval from the DRC, as I mentioned. We will talk about more eligibility questionnaires. They're always constantly doing, like I said, every deposit or blood draws. We're doing physical examinations, infectious disease testing, genetic disease screening, and then that's when we will kind of determine whether they have a final approval or not from the DRC. But they also doesn't stop there, because they have a lot of additional information they still have to provide. All right, so the comprehensive physical exam. So this is done on the same day of the initial blood draw. So basically we're doing the infectious disease and the genetic screening on the same day of the physical exam. This is a comprehensive exam to examine the applicant's overall health. We have contracted medical providers who will follow also our guidelines and our expertise in doing physical exams, but it also includes the FDA specific screening as well. So we have a very lengthy exam form that they have to follow and abide by. And this is for them to look for any indicators of disease, whether it's infectious or hereditary. All right, infectious disease testing. So FDA requires us to have infectious disease testing, but Fairfax actually goes above and beyond. We do a little bit more, which I'll explain at the end of what we do. But basic testing, the serological testing, we do either blood or serum. So we do HIV 1 and 2, Hep B and C. The cytomegalovirus is the CMV antibody, which at my next slide, I'll go in a little bit more detail because I know a lot of people have questions about the IgG and IgM. And we do also the syphilis and HTLV 1 and 2. So we also do a PCR NAT testing, the nucleic acid testing. We do this for the HIV 1 and 2, HTLV 1 and 2, HCV, chlamydia, and gonorrhea. And then again, we also do the cytomegalovirus, but we do this as NAT testing. So we actually extract the DNA from the actual semen sample. So this is what we can try to determine if there is any type of virus inside of this, this actual semen sample. So we also do this for the herpes simplex 1 and 2. And then we also do the HPV strains 16 and 18. If you're familiar, it is the strains that's related to cervical cancer. And as of right now, I believe that we are the only ones, the cryobank, that does this. So we actually have our own laboratory that performs this, and they're MIDL, the Molecular Infectious Disease Laboratory, and they are located at our corporate office in Virginia. All right, so the CMV. So I just want to ensure everyone, this is a popular topic with a lot of people, so we want to ensure you. So when you go into the donor search list, you're going to see donors who are either CMV negative or CMV positive. So if it says CMV positive, it does not mean they have an active infection. It just simply means that they have been exposed in the past and have protective antibodies. So if for some reason that CMV IgM antibody or the CMV NAT, which I told you about the extraction of the DNA from the semen sample, if those come out positive, they are automatically deferred, and we will all destroy all the affected samples. So there will be no affected samples for sale. If the positive CMV IgG, which I mentioned, that is listed onto the list for the donor search, that means that they do not have an active infection, that they have just been simply exposed prior, before, and just carry the antibodies. So approximately about 50 to 75% of people have been exposed, and about 30% of our donors have tested negative for CMV, so meaning 70% of our donors are CMV positive. So we definitely highly recommend that you talk to your medical provider, because there are so many mixed reviews whether they want you to use one or not. So we definitely recommend you talking to your medical provider and asking them what their preference is. Also, client services will also recommend that as well. Okay, so COVID screening and testing. So obviously we've all been through this pandemic, and even our donors have too. And so in the midst of the pandemic, we were following the FDA and the American Society of Reproductive Medicine, ASRM. We have been following their screening recommendations to a T. So every deposit that is made, any type of visit, the donor is coming to do a screening questionnaire. If for some reason they have symptoms, we automatically will not let them donate. And that even goes for if they're just regular sick, like we don't want you trying to produce when you have a low cell count. So that being said, if they have any symptoms or a known exposure, we will defer the donor. And if they test positive, they will be deferred for 28 days, and they have to have at least 2 negative PCR testing. the SARS-CoV-2 PCR, which we also do at MIDL in our corporate office, they must have 2 before they can donate again. So we're really strict about the COVID screening. All right, so genetic testing. I am not a geneticist, so I'm just going to go over the basics with you, but I highly recommend that you watch one of our recent I believe August 3rd was our recent webinar for genetic screening by Suzanne Seitz, our genetic counselor. She is absolutely amazing. She goes over in detail with the whole screening process and how it's been evolved, and it's very, very informative. So I do recommend that you go watch that. But I'm going to go over the basics with you. So we do a chromosome analysis, which is a karyotype, and that is just to verify the integrity of the chromosome. We do cystic fibrosis, hemoglobin electrophoresis. We both do the beta and alpha thalassemia. We do the spinal muscular atrophy, the SMA. And then so our expanded carrier screening, January of 2018, we started testing new donors over 280 recessive diseases. And starting this year of January, we started testing for over 502 recessive diseases. So these donors won't start until releasing until later out, probably the 4th quarter, like the fall of 2022, even though that's coming up really fast. But genetic testing summaries, you can actually find the donor's testing summary on the donor search. So if you click on one of the donors, you'll see on the right-hand side that there's a genetic testing summary, and it'll provide you what expanded panel they have done. And of course, if older donors might not have all of the testing done because, genetics has obviously evolved throughout the years. So back then, they might not have the exact testing of all the different recessive diseases, but you'll be able to see onto the donor search. Also, if they are a carrier, there will be a disclosure that you can look at and review. We highly recommend that bringing to your own genetic counselor so that you can educate yourself and depending on what type of carriers they have. And then you can also sign that disclosure, and then you can use that donor if you want to. If you actually know you're a carrier for something, you can go onto the donor search, and then on the very bottom, the advanced search, it'll have genetic screening, and you can try to, click on one of the diseases or the gene, and you can see if one of the donors have been tested for the specific carrier that you're a carrier for. If not, you can call client services. They can direct you, see if it's a possibility or not to have the donor test for that. So with all of that information, so we have the physical exam, we have the infectious disease testing, the COVID testing, we have the genetic testing. We actually will submit all of that information to the DRC, but the donor's information doesn't stop there. They are still working to become a donor. So they will actually go back into the original account where they did the medical application. There's a section on there where it says personal profile or donor essays. So they will complete that as well. And then once they've complete that, the personal profile is a very extensive summary profile, which will also include like the physical, medical history, family medical history, again, the 3-4 generations, religion, updates. So any type of update on the donors, they will provide that into the summary profile at the very bottom, and you can see if there's any type of updates. Next slides, I'll explain what type of updates we have. They all will provide a childhood photo. And if you think about for a couple years now, it might be 3 or 2 years, we require adult photos now from all the ID donors. So all the adult photos just means we get a professional picture. We have a professional photographer that will do their photo, and then we'll post that onto the donor search catalog. So that has actually upped our game with the whole adult photos, approximately at 45% now out of the total donor pool that do have adult photos. Lifetime photos, that is still optional. So that's basically anywhere from your childhood to an adult. So I mentioned the donor essay. So the donor essay is also done on their account, basically giving them questions and they respond on written form. Personality type is they do the personality test, and for example, if they're extrovert or introvert, etc. The full audio interview is actually one of our most popular products, is because we will do about 15 to 20 minute audio interview. One of our staff members will ask the donor questions, and you can actually hear their voice, and you can hear their speech, their tone, their emotions when they speak. So it is actually a very great tool to use if you are interested. It really helps you get a better idea of a donor's emotions. So it's great. So on the right-hand side, these are actually additional items that we do for the donors. As I mentioned, the summary profile, staff impressions, simply the staff writes impressions of the donor, audio clips from the donor. That's a free tool. It's a little bit of the clip of the full audio interview. So it's only about 1, maybe 2 minutes. Medical profile, that is basically everything with the medical profile. And as I mentioned, the genetic testing summary. And then we also do face matching, where you can actually download a picture of your partner, a friend, anybody, and do a facial comparison with the donor. And then also we do the silhouette, which is like the blacked out version of the side profile. So this is all items that donors are still trying to complete. Okay, so donor categories. This is actually, we get a lot of questions. What's the difference with non-ID and ID? So the non-ID donors, these are the donors that did not agree to release their identifying information to the donor-conceived individual, the DCI. It's just because they at this time when they were doing the contract, they have felt that maybe this is something that would be private for them. ID donors, on the other hand, agrees to release identifying information once the DCI turns 18 or older. So March 2020, Fairfax decided to only accept ID donors only. We made this personal decision because we felt like we needed to grow with society and also have the chance for DCIs to also have the chance to know who their donor is. It just feels like the way that the future is moving towards. For all the recipients who do use ID donors, you must register them. So I'll go in the DCI process after this. Non-ID to ID donors, California passed a legislation to allow non-ID donors to change to ID. So we began this process in January 2020. It's not mandatory, but we have allowed donors to change to ID if they want to. And we will provide this information on our annual updates, which I also will go in the next session. So just a little FDA uses of the term anonymous donor. So this is what they use as far as a sperm bank donor. We use ID and non-ID. Directed donation is a completely different program. This is basically if a recipient knows somebody, like a friend, a partner's relative, or someone that's known to you but non-sexual intimate partner, and you want to use them as a donor. So if you guys are interested in any directed donor programs, you can contact our sites. They can go over the whole program with you, or you can contact also client services. Donor conceived individuals. So this is what I was mentioning, the DCI process. So Once you have registered your adult child, they will contact us directly. We will not disclose any information to the recipients. We only work with the DCI. So they must be 18 years of age or older. They will contact our cryobank, and then we will provide them a form, and they will need to provide us an ID, birth certificate, a passport. And once we receive all of that information, we will verify the birth and confirm that there is a registered birth. And then we will also reach out to the donor for the preferred method of contact. So we do this as a courtesy for the donors, because sometimes they want to do email or phone, or majority of times like email conversations, but we at least give them that option. Once they provide that information to us, then we will contact the DCI and give them the preferred method of contact along with the identifying information of the donor. If we do not find out the preferred method of contact from the donor in an allotted time frame, then we will simply, at the very end of that time frame of the deadline, then we will just provide everything to your DCI. So family limits. So this ties in, obviously registering your DCI, but also reporting your birth is very, very, very important. So we do ask you on your terms of use, we do ask you all the time, basically report your pregnancies and births, because this is what will determine our family limits. Fairfax stops distribution to the new clients when there are 25 births reported in the US. So once we have received the 25th birth, we stop distribution, and we will lock in that donor. And if there are any vials available still, those will only be able to be used by the actual family that already has a recorded birth. We also distribute globally, so we follow all the local international regulations. For example, we distribute to the UK, and their guideline is 10 families max. So that is the same rules that apply to the US, except they have 10 families. Historical concern about consanguinity or half sibling couplings. Of course, this is a definite concern, but we do highly recommend doing a disclosure with your DCI, because this plays a big role in not only your future, but their future as well. So we do recommend that disclosure plays a major part of this, this situation. Okay, so we have ongoing donor screening and testing. So as I mentioned, throughout the whole process, the donor still donating, they will do the eligibility screening questionnaires at every donation, regardless. They will do that every single time. And then infectious disease testing is about every 90 days. So FDA doesn't require the 90-day rule. This is our rule for Fairfax, but their rule is 180 days. So this also includes the releasing of vials from quarantine. So this means when, say, for example, a donor donates today, that vial or whatever they produce today will have to be in quarantine for 180 days. And if they're still in the program, that 180-day mark, we will do the infectious disease testing as well as a physical exam. So that's what happens when they are still in the program. So once they have that, there's other times, we do monthly, after if it's been 180 days, we do monthly testing, because sometimes we have someone's like, oh, we're waiting for more, vials, and so sometimes we'll do like a monthly infectious disease testing so we can release some more vials. It just depends, because it's not always guaranteed as well, because we need to make sure the infectious disease screening or testing comes back negative, and that will determine whether we can release more vials. If it doesn't, then we will have to discard those vials and wait until the next process of whatever remaining vials are, but we still have to wait the 180-day mark. So these donors, They're annual updates to donor profiles. So we reach out annually to update their medical and social history, including their family history. So they're always going to be in this program. And as I mentioned with the screening and testing, even if they retire, they still have to come afterwards to do the infectious disease testing in order to release those other vials and so forth. So every year, we actually send an email or a notification to update their medical and social history. They can also go into their account, and then they can also do, like update their information as well. Like say if like a grandparent died or someone, sick with illness, etc. So all this information will go to the genetic counselor, and she will review and do any updates to the summary profile. So again, the summary profile is in the donor search, and when you click on the donor, you go to donor summary profile, and at the very end is where they do any of the updates. This also includes the non-ID donors that are asked if they want to be ID. So we do ask them yearly. We've had like a handful of donors participate and change to ID, but we don't change their status, the non-ID. We still keep them as non-ID, but we will put that note in the summary profile. And so what we'll do is send them a form. They have to get it notarized, and then they send it back to us, and then we do that summary update. Okay, I promise, I'm almost done. So vial preparation types. This is a big question a lot of people have. Again, we tell you to ask your medical provider to see what they prefer, and then you can always contact client services to see what type of vials are available, or you can kind of see on the website to see what they have available. So let's start with the key. We have IUI, which is the intrauterine insemination, ICI, intracervical insemination, ART, assisted reproductive procedure, IVF, in vitro fertilization, ICSI, intracytoplasmic sperm insemination. So the IUI vials are pre-washed and have at least 10 million motile sperm. The seminal fluid has actually been removed prior to the freezing process. So these vials can be used for in-office inseminations. It's basically for example, we've had like certified midwives, but they don't have the capability of washing the sperm, so they'll use these vials to do an intrauterine insemination. The ICI vials, they are not washed, but they still have 10 million motile sperm. The seminal fluid was not removed prior to the freezing. So your clinic has to have the capability of washing the specimen if you are going to do an in-office insemination. IVF clinics, they do have that capability. So it's mainly for, ICI vials are mainly used for doing home inseminations. That is the preferred type of vial. If for some reason we don't have an ICI, you can still use IUI or the ART vials. So ART vials can either be IUI or ICI. They both have at least 6 million motile sperm. These vials, you can actually combine 2 of them to do an in-office home insemination, or you can do the in-office insemination. So remember, but the clinics have to have the capability of washing the specimens if you're going to use any type of ICI vial. So for home insemination, we'll provide you a needleless syringe, and then you will just go ahead and inject it into the vagina. And so basically your vagina is like a natural wash where, this is the preferred method of the type of vials you can use. Again, you can use IUI if you need to. In-office insemination, you can use the IUI, ICI, exactly like I said, as long as they can wash it. And then you can also do the combination of the ART vials. Assisted reproductive technology vials, IVF and ICSI, basically they can use any type of vial. They might have a preference. Your medical provider might want you to have ICI or IUI, but it's up to them. So we definitely recommend you talking to your medical provider. All right, so that's done for me. I'm going to move on to the Q&A section. It looks like we have promo code donor screening 2022 and you'll save $149 on the full unlimited access program. That I would definitely take advantage of, because that is a great price. And I'm sure Doreen, our client services manager, she's going to explain any type of client service questions. I am not a medical professional, but if you have a medical question, I will be happy to pass that on to one of our medical professionals and get you an answer right away. So yeah, exactly. Thank you so much for attending, and I hope I was here to help a little bit. So thank you guys.
Hello, thank you so much, Christina. That was great. We have a couple questions already trickling in, so let's go ahead and get started. Are you adding COVID history to medical history now?
It is basically because of certain symptoms, yes. So the medical review, it basically will ask if, if there's any type of any symptoms, because regardless, if you are not feeling well in general, we ask you not to come and make a deposit. And that's why we'll, even regardless, if you have any type of symptoms, we will have you test for COVID in general.
Great. I'm very interested in purchasing vials from a specific donor, which shows is active. How can I know that what month vials will be available? Doreen?
So that's going to depend, that's going to depend on when those vials are going to be released in the quarantine period. We're not going to be able to give you an exact time frame for that, but we are able to let you know if there are still pending vials, and if we do expect the donor to release any additional vials.
Great. And then how do I know why or which donors are available to ship to Canada?
Great question. So that you'll have to reach out to the distributors, Canada Cryobank, Can-Am, and ReproMed, to see what their inventory is. They have separate inventory that I'm not able to see in my system. So they'll be able to let you know what's available there.
And we just have one other question. We're not getting a ton, so don't forget to put them into the question box if you guys have questions for client services, Doreen or Christina, over the stuff she shared today. But the only one that I'm seeing here that's left is there is a donor I'm interested in, but he doesn't have an adult photo, just one baby photo. I would like to see a professional photo. You mentioned is a requirement, but it is not uploaded.
So we do have clinical photos that the client services team is able to access. We're not able to share those with clients, but if you have questions about what that donor looks like, any specific thing that you're reading on their medical or their profile, and you want us to look at the photos and confirm that with you, we're happy to.
Great. I think that's it for questions. I mean, is there anything else that you guys wanted to cover or clarify from today?
I did see want to just clarify about the family limits. I think it's 25 family units is our limit, not 25 births.
Oh, yes, 25 families, yes.
Yeah, so a family could have more than one child. So we don't limit it for the births, but if you already have a child with a donor and your donor is restricted to sibling use only because they've met their family limits, you're going to be able to still purchase that as long as that birth is registered with us.
Yes.
Awesome. And that's it. I'm not seeing any other questions coming in, so I think we'll just end it today. Thank you everyone for joining our webinar, and hope you all learned some good information.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.